Morning, Winston. A word?
So what's your little problem got to do with His Majesty's Royal Air Corps?
Not a damn thing.
Is it dangerous?
Well, you probably won't live through it.
Why, Joe? Do you really think so?
Well, everybody else we bumped into has died. Why not you?
What's the challenge then?
Rescue the damsel in distress, kill the bad guy, and save the world.
Oh, Winston Havelock, at your service, sir.
Welcome to night 5 of 13 Nights of Halloween. Tonight, we're talking about the Mummy. I'm Tim.
I'm Bryce.
And tonight we have one of the OG Average members, one of the founding fathers of the Average joining us, Hayden.
What's up, everybody?
It's nice to finally have you on an episode.
Yeah, it's been nice to find some time in our chaotic schedules to make this sync up and work.
Yes, I'm super excited. Hopefully we can get you on a couple more.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I will break this down plot-wise for us, and then we'll dive into our scores. Adventurer Rick O'Connell and Egyptologist Evelyn, along with a bunch of archaeologists, inadvertently wake up an evil mummy during an archaeological excavation at the ancient city of Homenoptera. It was released on June 24th, 1999, directed by Stephen Sommers. There you go. It's technically a remake of the original Mummy movie from 1932.
Whew, man.
Yes, starring
really long.
Starring Boris Karloff. So it actually goes way back. This movie, we know technically, I'm not sure I would call this movie a horror movie, so it kind of struggles to fit into that Halloween vibe. However, there are some horror elements to this. It does retain some of that spooky factor, kind of from the original movie. So we'll talk those up a little bit to make this fit in with our 13 Nights of Halloween.
It fits, we promise.
So Hayden, where do you want to fall in our score lineups? Do you want to lead us off? Do you want to go in the middle, or do you want to finish them?
Toss me in the middle.
All right, you go in the
Classy.
middle. Bryce, you led last time. You want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I gave the story a 3, and I gave it a 3 because it is a remake. However, I didn't take it lower because this does add a ton to that story. I probably a little harsh on the 3. I could probably take it up to 4. It's a strong 3. Because there really is a lot added to this film that keeps it fresh, keeps it new. It doesn't feel like a shot-for-shot remake. It almost changes the genre completely of the original. So yeah, I give it a 3 kind of because it borrows the core elements, but it does breathe new life into it. So that's why I gave it a 3. Like I said, I probably a little too harsh on the story there. All right, but Hayden, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I went ahead and gave it a 4. Part of that, I did not know it was a remake. I knew that they pulled some inspiration from the original Mummy movie to do this, but I thought that on its own did really, really well. I mean, we all know that this is a super iconic movie for Brendan Fraser, for this like thriller horror combo genre. And there were some elements where it felt like it was repeating things that we've seen in movies before. But I thought that overall, like, this stands out as its own entity. So for me, it was easily a 4.
Yeah, I'm actually going to line up with Hayden here. I gave the story a 4 out of 5 as well. I can totally understand Tim's side for docking it because it's a remake. I think I've seen the original Mummy once, maybe twice, loosely. But I didn't really care for it personally. It's not one that's in my catalog when I'm shuffling through horror movies to watch. But The Mummy is definitely up there. It definitely has grown from a movie that I kind of like to more of it's one of my all-time guilty pleasures. And that's not to say that it's a bad movie, but I definitely think that the story for the most part is pretty concrete. I don't think there's anything super special about the baseline story of this movie, but it's all the little pieces that are added into it, all these little side stories and things that are added to everyone's individual stories that kind of drive the rest of the main story and make it more interesting. From the beginning, where you get the backstory of the mummy himself and where that all started, I think that's a fascinating opening sequence. Personally, that kind of gets me in the mood for the rest of it, and even to the very end, which is pretty fun climax, and for me at least, I think the story overall, while imperfect, I think it's actually pretty fleshed out for what it is and deserves a little bit of credit for adding some great storylines for each character individually that build on that super simple storyline of mummy's dead, mummy comes back to life, take over world, etc. So yeah, solid 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you. Like I said, I think I was probably a little harsh because it was the remake, and I just remake's not original, but yeah, it definitely adds a lot of freshness to that story.
Totally.
So,
yeah.
Jumping in, let's talk about character. I actually gave the character, now preface it as I usually do, I grade character arc, not character likability. I talk about likability in the script. I gave character arc a 3. I don't really think there's much character arc. It is, we discover these people, we go on an adventure with them, we have a wonderful time with them, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure I could tell you the emotional, spiritual, physical journey necessarily that they all go on. I'm not sure how Brendan Fraser's character grows during the movie. I'm not sure how Evelyn's character grows. I'm not sure how the brothers grow, or the brother. So I struggled on that one. However, I had a hard time putting in a negative score because I love these characters.
Mm-hmm.
So that is it definitely did sway my score. So if I missed a character arc in the film, please tell me. But as far as character arc, I didn't feel like there was a super compelling, emotional storyline. So I gave it a 3.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. For me, when I was looking back through it, felt the same way. Couldn't really pick out any elements of a character arc for anyone. The only thing that I was able to kind of remember or point out in it was at the beginning when Evelyn first meets O'Connell. He's locked up in the cage, all scruffy, in some Middle Eastern prison, and he seems a little bit more rough around the edges, but they very quickly clean him up, and he goes from being an individual who seems to be looking out for himself only to now caring about this unit that he was just thrust into, and there wasn't much build up to it. So it felt like they knew where they wanted him to go, and they didn't want to waste any of the time in the script getting there. So they just pushed him right into it, which I don't think does the movie a disservice by any means either.
No, I agree.
I think focusing on the plot and getting to the world itself feels very, very lived in. And so I think that the characters all felt really real, but yeah, no big arcs for anyone.
Yeah, so this is where I'll diverge a little bit from the consensus here. I did give it a 4 out of 5, and Hayden already pointed it out. There is somewhat of a character arc with Brendan Fraser's character, and you could even throw Rachel's character in there also. Both Evelyn and Rick kind of have this little chemistry that's building up throughout the entire movie. I don't think it's quite as rushed as you were saying. I think it's it's definitely the situation of, yeah, he's all scruffed up. He's kind of this Han Solo / Indiana Jones-esque character. He's there for the adventure. He's there to get what he wants. He's not going to let anyone get in his way, but it just so happens, oh, this is going to benefit me, so I'm going to serve this plot here, if you will. But yeah, I think it is a little bit more of a slow burn, because even about over halfway through the movie, he's more than willing to leave Evelyn at that point. So I still think that there is a continuous buildup of their arc as their relationship grows throughout the entire movie. And I'm a sucker for that kind of story. I always like the story of the character who's super selfish and throughout the movie learns to do good things for other people, even if there's nothing in it for them. I'm just a sucker for that story arc. Even though it's not a super strong one, I still think it's there, and it's a nice little journey to go on. But outside of character arc, also, like you said, these characters are just super awesome. This is one of the few movies where every single character, I just remember all of them. Obviously, you love Rick. Again, as the Han Solo, Indiana Jones-esque adventurer. Evelyn is a beautiful and super smart woman who can carry her own throughout this entire movie. One of definitely the stronger female characters in a movie. Jonathan is a good, nice little comedy relief here and there as Evelyn's brother. And Arnold Vosloo, who plays the mummy. Even just him, like, he doesn't have to do a lot, but even the moments he's on screen, he kind of just takes over, and like he means business.
There's not a line from the mummy in English.
Yep, not a single one.
Still commands those scenes just like the character itself.
Yes.
We'll break this all down later, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but
his character,
I totally agree with what you're saying.
And his character is a perfect case of, like, he's just evil because he has a push for why he's doing bad things. But I go back to, I love just bad characters. Like, they don't always have to have a motivation, even if it's a weak one like his. I still think he's a really compelling character and he's fun when he's on screen. But
you think love is a weak motivation?
Hey,
he wants his love back, Bryce.
Well, yeah, he also wants to burn the world down. So I don't know
if
it's really
powerful motivation.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't think they're perfect characters by any stretch, but they're absolutely memorable. There is some arc to their story. It's nothing new that you haven't seen in a movie, but I still think it hits the spot when it comes to this movie and its story in particular. All
right. Some good points brought up.
Thank you.
Yeah. So jumping into the music, I gave the music a 4. I thought the music was really well done as a companion piece to the movie itself. It is fairly memorable. There's a lot of, I don't know how to say it, but like, it sounds regional at appropriate times. It sounds suspenseful at appropriate times. There's even some slight horror cues at appropriate times. I thought the music did a great job being a companion piece to the film. It's not a 5 where the music on its own I'm gonna jump in and listen to the soundtrack. But as a companion piece, I thought it is a great soundtrack for a movie score.
Yeah, I feel very similar. I went with a 3 out of 5 for the music. I'm not going to sit here and say that I am some huge music buff, know all the biggest song or composers and everyone. But there are iconic ones that stand out, Alan Silvestri, John Williams, and all of them. And I love being able to find part of a score from a movie that I can just throw a song or two on from time to time and just chill and almost get drawn back into that world. And there wasn't really anything from The Mummy that stood out, like no scene for me that really grabbed me. And I was like, oh, I want to listen to that again. I want to feel that. Very different movie to compare this to, but the portal scene from Endgame, the track titled Portals by Alan Silvestri, I believe it is. Just awesome. I can put that on in my car at any time and get super pumped up, and I feel like I'm there. The Mummy, good music, like you said, it fit the region, fit the geography. It was appropriate music for all the scenes, but nothing that really stood out to make it go above and beyond into that 4 or 5 category for me.
Totally fair.
Yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5, a strong 3 out of 5, I'd say. The music is pretty good for, I don't want to say average music, but like it's pretty solid. It's very memorable music, I think, as you're listening to it the entire time. I definitely know the soundtrack when I hear it. I don't think it's anything super special, but I think it works really. Like you said, it's a good companion to the movie. It doesn't really go out of its way to show off how great it is, but it also doesn't. It's not super forgettable like other movies, I would say. So I don't feel like I need to say too much on this. I think it's a really good. I think it's a pretty good soundtrack for what it is. So a strong 3.
If you were with us yesterday, it's by far better than the Craft soundtrack.
Let's not even, don't even start.
I think you touched on it with the 3 and the 4, where I really struggled and where I question if 4 was fair enough for me is, or maybe 4 is justified in this, is that it kept that adventure soundtrack without sounding like Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
But also I missed the Indiana Jones, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad it didn't attempt to knock off Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
There's no knocking off John Williams. All right. So then into the editing and special effects. I felt like I was pretty harsh, but also not. The special effects in this movie are good. There are, and that's, for me, that's an average, because there are moments in this movie where the special effects look fantastic still. And then there are moments in this movie where the special effects look really bad. So I had those two comparisons that I settled on a 3, because there are moments of this movie that I'm like, man, this looks really good years later. Some of the early Mummy stuff really is where I noticed the fluctuation. There are some scenes with the early Mummy when he's not fully formed that I was like, man, that looks really good. And then the next shot, he would look super smooth, almost like video game quality, not quite right. So it fluctuated back and forth, but where I noticed the biggest special effects issues, where I had those, were some of the later, well, not later, mid to later backgrounds. They would change the sky or change the color of the sky, and some of those scenes, you would have really blurry edges where the sky met like the pyramids or where the sky met the ground, and it was clear that they were trying to edit and change that background. Those scenes were rough, but there are other parts of this that are fantastic. So I was actually very impressed by the opening scene of ancient Egypt. I thought that actually looked really good, and this was made in 99, and it's probably comparable to some of the recent Marvel CGIs as far as background goes. But yeah, so I settled on a 3. I kind of averaged it out between some of the rougher stuff with some of the really, really good stuff. I think some of these scenes might have benefited from using some older techniques. If you go back to the original Hellraiser, where the man comes out of the floorboards and his body re-knits itself, and that was done all practically by melting it away slowly and filming it in reverse, playing it in reverse. I was watching that final scene when Imhotep kind of dissolves, and it looked a little rough. And I'm like, man, this is a moment that some of those practical effects that we used in the 80s and early 90s would have strengthened the scene. And yeah, those are my thoughts on it. So it kind of averaged out to a 3 for me. The special effects overall, they were good. Some of it is great. Some of it is not that great.
Yeah, it's almost like we're flipping spots from our last score there with the music. I gave it a 4 in this area. And I think for me, huge nostalgia piece. So it's hard to knock it too much. But I also tried to view this through the lens of watching it in 1999 or early 2000s rather than comparing it to what we see today. I really, really loved the fact that they built sets and they did a lot of like shooting on site for this. It looks awesome. And like I mentioned earlier, makes the world feel lived in. There's like a hustle and bustle that's going on behind everything that we're focused on in the movie that doesn't make it feel like, oh, we're just here to film The Mummy. It's no, this story is taking place in a larger world. And so I thought that the effects used there with, and I use set design and all that, I throw it in with the effects too. And so I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
Loved a lot of the practical stuff that they did with the mummy warriors that come out to defend Imhotep. And whatever the Namun, his bride that he's trying to bring back when she comes back as a zombie, looked phenomenal. But then, when you compare that to the early stages of The Mummy, when Imhotep is regenerating himself, it just doesn't look quite right. And I always remember or recall watching that and thinking, man, that mummy looks way bigger and like more buff than Imhotep actually ends up looking. And
that's a fair point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and they just don't mesh up. So I was doing a little bit of research here, just reading about some of the special effects they used. And as the mummy started to take on Arnold's appearance and looking like Imhotep, they used digital prosthetics and meshed that together with CGI to make it look like him. But before he starts to take on that appearance, when we first see him and he takes the guy's eyes and tongue, that is completely synthetic. They just made that on their own, didn't use like mocap or green screen. And so I think that is one area where they really failed, was not going practical really across the board, because it would have benefited them a lot more. I didn't notice as much like the sky changing. There were a few times where he did like he'd swirl and turn into sand and fly away. And I thought it looked a little cheesy, but the movie as a whole has a pretty good cheese factor at a certain level. So I just sat back and appreciated that rather than getting too worked up over it. But yeah, I thought that overall solid 4 for me. Again, practical effects being one of the biggest points. And just shooting on site really, really made a big deal for me and for my fiance as well. She came in the early parts where they were walking around in some town in Egypt or wherever. And she made the comment about how, man, I wish movies still did that. And you know what? Yeah. Me too, babe. Me too.
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts about that at the end. Yes, well, I agree.
Yeah. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. I actually came in after rewatching the movie. I was actually surprised how well some of the special effects actually hold up comparatively to a lot of movies during that time, especially by today's standards. I would say. I think honestly, the Mummy, when he's still like in his mummification state, actually looked pretty darn good for the time period, because I'm taking into account also like the time it was made. So is it perfect? Not at all. It's definitely got its flaws, and there are a lot of scenes where it does stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. But to Hayden's point, man, the practical effects in this movie they don't hold back on them at all. And I think it definitely benefits the movie. Kind of like what you've been saying, it makes the world feel lived in. Like it doesn't just feel like they're acting in front of a screen like so many Marvel movies will do today, or any big budget movies that are too lazy to get a real shot in the desert. Like, no, this movie takes the time to do it, and it just benefits the movie that much more. But like I said, there's still some special effects that do stick out like a sore thumb. I still think even the good stuff that still looks pretty decent, it's still noticeable. It's not perfect, but I don't think it at all distracts in any way with your experience during the movie. I think it all works decently well for the time it was made. And I actually think that's probably a higher point of this movie, especially with the early stages of the Mummy when he's still in his rotted state. I still think that was some of the better moments, especially leaning more into the horror aspects of this movie, which bring it into the 13 Nights of Halloween. So yeah, 3 out of 5.
There you go. You looped it back in.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got that Halloween in there. All right.
Yeah, I fit it in there. No big deal.
Yeah, this movie has some slight horror elements. Jumping into script, already I feel like I'm too harsh giving this a 4. Thinking back on this now, this script is borderline brilliant. It manages to make you like even the characters we're supposed to hate. There's just something so strangely endearing about Benny. He's rotten and hilarious, and he and O'Connell's chemistry was on point. O'Connell himself is that kind of lovable rogue. And Rachel Weisz's character, Evelyn.
Yeah, Evelyn.
She's just amazing from beginning to end. Just the kind of klutzy, nerdy librarian, but she's also just confident. Like those two things coexist. And I love it. It's not that she had to go on this journey of like discovering her confidence from going to like nerd to confident, powerful. She knew she was and just kept trying to like, no, listen to me. And I love that about her character. And it was one of those where like, even when Imhotep takes her and Brendan jokes later, like save the damsel in distress, but she chose to be in distress, which I think was a brilliant script moment of just like, come with us and save their life or I'll kill you all, basically. Mm-hmm. And she's like, she asks him, she confirms with him. So like, are you thinking? And he's like, yes. And she's like, okay, I'm going. You have time to save me. And it's like, she was assertive in that situation. She took control in her way of her own destiny in that moment, but trusted others to be there. Like there's so many subtleties in this script that are actually far better than this movie deserves. I didn't give it a 5 because there's not really like emotional depth. There's not really like powerful moments. It's just really good. So that's why I gave it a 4. It's funny. It's borderline scary at moments. It's just exceptionally well balanced across the board in a way that movies aren't anymore, honestly.
Yeah,
and that's
so
all I have for that.
I will come in to save the day, Tim, and I will give it a 5 for you because I
thank you.
Absolutely loved like really everything about this. One of the like standout parts of this for me was obviously we all love Brendan Fraser as Rick. Jonathan is hilarious. Evelyn is a great, strong female character who's not motivated purely by lust or following a man around. But I really, really enjoyed the other architects that they end up, or not architects, archaeologists, sorry, that they end up teaming up with. Like one of my favorite lines was, I believe the character Mr. Burns, he walks over after they get raided by the Egyptian group that's protecting the burial site and just says, what do you say we team up for tonight? And I just thought, like, to me, it was just so funny and perfectly timed. And all of those 4 guys, they took their roles so seriously, even though they weren't big name characters. They were in the movie for a good chunk, but they were committed to their roles and they were given good material to work with. And I think that genuinely, that is why they were able to throw themselves into it so well. Brendan Fraser obviously does an awesome job as Rick. Jonathan is hilarious. He's got a quippy one-liner for everything, but it's not uncomfortable. There's nothing that he says or does that really makes you go, that didn't hit. I felt like
it's not obnoxious.
Yeah, all of the jokes land. They're timed perfectly. He knows.
They managed to keep him likable, even with that personality, which is very difficult.
Well, and the actor too, like just his look about him, John Hannah. The structure of his face, it's kind of like rat-like almost. So it's easy to look at him and think like, oh, he's just this, D-bag guy, and he's not going to be very likable. But no, he ends up being awesome. And yeah, there's not a single part of the script really that I would pick apart, other than if we go back earlier to some of the character. After Bryce mentioned it, I do see that there was a little bit more long-term storytelling between Rick and Evelyn and them kind of connecting. But I would have liked to see just maybe a smidge more reluctance from Rick in the beginning, and him kind of getting dragged into it and like, oh boy, here we go again. But other than that, I mean, it's just great. It's an awesome movie.
Yeah, I kind of bounced back and forth between 4 and 3 on this one. I ended up just giving it a 3. You could probably convince me to give it a 4 without much fighting back, honestly. I agree with you guys. I think the script is pretty good for the most part. Let's see where to start. Really, I agree. I think the script is pretty funny more often than not. I think the biggest thing about the comedy aspect was that at times it kind of felt like it didn't always hit. Maybe it's just like bad timing on some parts. It wasn't super bad. Like it wasn't like we have nowadays where it's just one-liners after the other. Like it wasn't that kind of bad. It just didn't always hit for me. Sometimes it kind of just felt like, oh, you probably could have gone without that there and just kind of wrote out that scene. And that even leads me into a little bit more of the balance between the comedy, the horror, the adventure. I do feel like the script, I don't want to say struggles, but doesn't always keep the ride smooth when balancing all those different genres together as one in their story. I think it does kind of take turns back and forth, like showing itself instead of more often than not incorporating all of it together to make it feel like one smooth script. So that was just a little something that I noticed. Again, not the end of the world. You could argue, you could easily twist my arm enough and make me say 4 on this. But even all the dialogue between the characters felt very natural. The chemistry was great between every actor, honestly. Hayden, you made a great point. Like these actors are some big name actors who didn't have to they didn't have to go as hard as they did with this script, and yet they did, which we'll get into the acting there. Because this script could have probably easily looked way worse with different actors, depending on who you put in here. But I still think that the script overall is very solid for what it is. Again, with a movie that's balancing both comedy, horror, and adventure all at once. The movie still makes you laugh. They still have great moments of horror that are written in here that work pretty well. I just think that the overall balance of it kind of can feel a little wobbly at times, and it doesn't really derail you, but it does kind of make you wonder, oh, well, maybe they could have like tweaked this here or there. But overall, I would say, yeah, strong 3 or even a soft 4, honestly. So, yeah.
All right. You did your best to justify the 3.
Yeah, like I said, you could twist my arm. I just kind of threw 3 in there because whatever.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we've kind of touched on it already in the acting. The only reason I gave this a 4 is because it's not going to win any Academy Awards, but every performance in this movie goes so hard. Brendan Fraser is fantastic across the board. Rachel Weisz is likable without, like, she's never snooty, she's never arrogant, but you can tell she knows what she's talking about, and she's probably the smartest one in the room. Benny cracks me up for no reason. There's just something like so snake-like and rotten about him and the character delivers it so well. It's fantastic.
Just so good.
And Yeah, I mean, like, even the bad characters in this movie, I didn't want them to die. I didn't want them to go away. I wanted them to stick around because the cast plays off themselves so well. Even Hayden mentioned the other group of explorers or adventurers. The movie doesn't really need them other than some of the mummy's body count. But I love them in there. They don't feel like they're taking away from our main characters. And much like Hayden said, those guys go hard on their parts. The part you mentioned, I laughed out loud at that part. There's other scenes towards the end. I started to just crack up at how every time something goes slightly tilted in this movie, something goes slightly wrong, there is usually a group of 3 to 5 guys who bust down the door, guns blazing, almost to the point that it's funny.
Yeah,
because no matter what, it's Brendan Fraser in the middle, and then there's 2 to 3 guys surrounding him, everybody pointing a gun, and it's like guns solve all the problems in this movie. I actually laughed really hard when Brendan Fraser was just firing the gun off the airplane into the sand cloud.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
What purpose is that serving?
Can't be, but yeah, funny.
Yeah, apparently the answers in this movie are just to fire that gun at everything that moves. But yeah, I've rambled on about it enough, but everybody in this movie delivers. There isn't a missed delivery, missed acting portion. They knock it out of the park on this film.
Mm-hmm.
No, completely agree. And I said a lot already when talking about the script. I know I gave the acting a 5, if that is any shock from how much I was drooling over the script. But again, I go back to those explorers. You've got one of the scenes where I was really rooting for them to make it out alive was, where's the character? Mr. Daniels. He's they're driving through town and he ends up falling off the vehicle, and all the people with all the boils and sores come up at him, and he's got his 2 revolvers and he pulls them out and he's shooting everybody down, and he sits there and he just starts clicking the empty guns. And I'm like, oh no, like, hurry, duck in that door behind you, like, start running, you can make this, knowing full well he's not going to, that he's got to die for Imhotep to come back fully. But it's like, oh, you're with these characters for a good chunk of the first half, 2/3 of the movie. And it's like, I don't want to see him go. There wasn't a single one. Benny, I was waiting for him to die throughout this movie because be honest, I forgot about his character. I watched this movie a lot when I was younger and hadn't seen it for quite a while up until this past week when I watched it. So I'm waiting for him just to get taken out. You know, Brendan Fraser he's over him and just shoots him, but he just weasels his way through. And when he first meets Imhotep and he pulls out his cross and he starts praying over it, and that doesn't do anything. So he throws it to the side. So then he pulls out the next religious symbol, and that doesn't do anything.
Hilarious.
He pulls out and just keeps going and going. And then they find the common language. And I'm like, who would have thought that this character would be the one that's connecting with the bad guy and not just immediately picked off? And him making it almost to the end blew my mind. The warden, the guy that comes with him at the very start of the adventure, who ends up getting the scarab under his skin. That is such an iconic scene for me because the way he acts that out, I mean, you think that he is genuinely fighting for his life. And I mean, he just runs straight into that wall at the very end and just thud, smack to the ground. And it sticks with you. Again, everybody, Captain Winston of the Royal Air Force. Why?
Yeah, like, so good.
What is he doing in there?
He's such a small part.
He could have phoned it in. He could have just been some guy in a suit or a uniform, rather, shows up with a plane. He's got it. Great. He flies them where they need to go, and then he leaves. But no, again, I go back to this world having so much depth. Him and Rick already have this relationship that they've built over years. And it's not just, oh, I know you, you know me. they expect to see each other at the bar. They know why the other one may be coming to them with questions or previous adventures that they've gone on. And he's in it for such a small amount of time, but man, was that just such a good performance. The only character that I think was not as well fleshed out, and I would have liked to see more, even though they were supposed to be stoic, is Ardith Bay, who is the leader of the
Magi.
The Magi. Yeah.
Yep. And so I would have liked to see
a much bigger part
him
in the sequel.
Yes. And I also realized in watching this movie that as much as I watched this when I was younger, I watched The Mummy Returns way more. So
Same.
I kept waiting for like those scenes to happen in the movie. And I'm like, man, they don't have much time to get through all of that. Yeah, no, that's just me having a big old brain fart there. But now I know what I'm going to watch this weekend. So it worked out all right.
That's funny. Yeah, I gave the acting a 3 out of 5. I think all the actors do really well, given their roles. I think the reason I brought it down was while I think for the most part it actually works to benefit this movie. And and I think it sticks. Sorry. The reason I gave it a 3 out of 5 was mostly because of just kind of the campy nature that seemed to really come off strong at certain times, which I was going to say is actually probably a lot of the reason I think the movie has a lot of longevity to it is because of the campiness. But I think that's why I eventually just kind of settled on a 3. Like I said, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the script. I just feel like the acting can kind of just be a little bit all over the place, and it doesn't always stay super consistent at times. Again, nothing that ever hurts the movie. Brendan Fraser absolutely is a blast to watch on screen in this movie. He absolutely kills the role. I actually think it's possibly my favorite performance outside of George of the Jungle, personally speaking. Also, Rachel as Evelyn. I think Rachel as Evelyn might be arguably the best character, most consistent character for me in this movie. She's one of my favorites. I just love
fantastic.
watching her. Yeah, I just love her, honestly. But yeah, to what you said, John as Jonathan, the brother, I think he's pretty good. I think he's the one where at times the campiness can kind of overstay its welcome just a little bit too much. But again, I think this is one where you could easily convince me from going from like a strong 3 to a soft 4, and I wouldn't really complain that much. Again, I just kind of landed on 3 because I just think in the grand scheme of things, these actors at the end of the day are just having a blast on set, and you can see it, and that's what makes the movie so enjoyable and fun to watch. But I think realistically looking at it as just a movie in itself and, trying to be a little critical about it as well, it's like, okay, well, yeah, they're having a blast and it's awesome. It's fun to watch, but that's why it's one of my like top tier, if not greatest guilty pleasure movies of all time, because it's not perfect. It's not what you would consider a great, fantastic movie, but still a really good and fun movie that I will happily pop in anytime to watch these actors act this way because it's fun and it's entertaining, and that's what I'm here to watch. So strong 3, you can convince me of a soft 4 maybe. Yeah,
I think that one thing with this movie that's kind of important too when you look at the quality of the script and the acting specifically is how you go into the movie, like, and what type of movie you're looking for. Like if we're scoring this purely as, this is our Halloween horror, scary movies and whatnot, then I'll be honest, it falls flat in a ton of those areas.
Totally.
But yeah, as a super fun movie, I think, like you said, just that cheesiness, the campiness of it really, really helps preserve it. I mean, like we said, even to this day, with all the effects and all that, the script and acting there really, really help this movie stay relevant. That, you could put it in at any time. You could still host a streaming of this movie at a local theater that seats, 100 people, and you'd pack it easily.
Probably
totally.
sell out. Yeah. I think much to your point, I mean, I was going to talk about it at final thoughts, but we're kind of diving into it right now. I've seen a recent resurgence, not just with Brendan Fraser, but there's a large audience of people who say that this is a nearly perfect film, which I'm not saying, like, I'll tap into it more at the end. But if I'm going to sit here and say this is the problem with The Mummy, I can't.
Okay.
What I can say is the direction, which we're going to jump into.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll say more towards the end. The direction, I give it a 4. It's nothing remarkable. It is nothing Academy Award earning. It's nothing. There's nothing really unique that stands out in the direction of this film. It can be lumped in with just about any other action adventure as far as direction goes. I did give it a 4 because I appreciated the director's timing of, there are quite a few scenes. Like, I just noticed I was watching one where they were saying something about, it was a line, something like, we need to get inside. And then it cuts immediately to somebody breaking inside of something that's unrelated to what was happening. And there's many instances of that throughout this film where it is set up to either have a visual punchline or an actual joke punchline or action set or something where it is so well connected and thought out that it works. And I also thought for the direction part, for people who were either in front of a green screen or didn't have something to look at, we have another movie coming up in 13 Nights of Halloween where we'll talk about this some more. But for those instances where that mummy was there and there wasn't motion capture or anything like that, I believe they were looking at something. And much of that is the director coaching them on what needs to be done and how this works. And there's just so many little things that it doesn't elevate the direction of this to Spielberg and Indiana Jones. It definitely feels not that quality, but it's also a step above like the Expendables. You know, it's not it's not your TNT action movie, but it's also not a Spielberg action movie. So that's why I think I enjoyed the first Expendables movie. That maybe get a 3 on direction, but like this is a step above that. It deserves some credit on the direction. However, I don't think it's the best directed movie. I don't think the director has any particular visual flair.
Yeah, I went ahead. I gave this one a 5 as well, and that's probably being generous on my end. Again, just really excited to be doing this movie, especially this being my first time getting on the podcast with you guys and getting to talk about it. Had me a little maybe overly excited, but we're
happy to have you.
But I think that even though it isn't like a groundbreaking movie overall, there are aspects of it that we can sit here and we can argue till we're blue in the face. But I think that the director, the actors, the writers, everybody knew what the end goal was. And that was to have an exciting adventure movie with believable action, believable villains, believable characters. And they set themselves up to do that. And it was executed almost perfectly. And so for me, even though it wasn't super unique, wasn't very different maybe from what other movies were doing, it was successful in everything that it set out to do. So that's where I come from with giving it the 5 for direction. And I'll reference mainly superhero movies because that's about all I watch. But if we think of something like Iron Man 3, it sets out to tackle the demon in a bottle storyline and the extremist storyline on top of dealing with PTSD and all of these other story elements from different movies. And it fails in most all of those because it spreads itself too thin, trying to sprinkle a little here, a little there. Whereas with a movie like The Mummy, they were able to give love and attention to every aspect because they knew at the end of the day, if they did that, they would have an amazing movie. And they've rightfully earned the cult following that this movie has.
Very good points. All right. So I gave it a 4 out of 5. I don't feel like I need to beat the dead horse. You guys made basically all the points that I was going to make. Yeah, I like I like that comment. I think everyone knew exactly what they were there for and what they were going to be doing in this movie. Everyone seemed to be on the same page. There didn't seem to be a lot of anyone who was who looked out of place or felt out of place with what they were doing. I agree. Who was the director? Stephen Sommers. Yeah, Stephen Sommers, I think, did a pretty good job with this movie and directing everyone else in it. I think the movie, pacing wise, is pretty good for the most part. I will say that it does drag a hair at the beginning with the movie a little bit. I think it takes just a hair too long to kind of get things rolling. I think you could definitely have cut some things out somewhere. I would say probably after between like where they get on the boat and onward, you probably could have cut some stuff out of there to kind of speed things up just a hair. 2 hours for a 2-hour movie, it really isn't that bad.
The boat scene is one of my favorite scenes of the movie.
Yeah,
so
no,
I think that's funny that you bring that up.
Yeah, no, the boat scene is funny. I think I mean more kind of after that. There's probably some parts in there I would have cut out personally, but I mean for 2 hours, it does not feel like it drags at all. I don't think it feels fast either. I think it kind of just feels like what it is, a 2-hour movie, and that's not a bad thing. But like I said, I think it's handled super well for what it is, and for whatever petty gripes I may have about this movie that I've talked about, I still think overall the movie is, from beginning to end, a smooth ride for the most part for what it is. You have a fun time with it. I think that Stefan had a major role in making sure everyone knew what they were getting into, and you can see that on screen throughout the entire movie. So 4 out of 5.
Stephen Sommers.
Steven or Stefan? It looks like Stefan. So Steven.
it's
Did I say both the names?
You said Stephen Sommers.
Stephen Sommers.
Hey, we got all the bases covered then.
It's fine. We covered every version of this name.
Yeah,
Stefan.
we got it. We got it down.
We can't be wrong at the end of the day if we do that.
All right. We're on It Factor now. So I'm actually surprised by this. I'm not surprised by my score. The It Factor for this movie is a 5, hands down. This movie is why It Factor is part of the score. This movie, I was 10 when this movie came out, and everybody was talking about this movie from, like Hayden pointed out earlier, kind of approaching the special effects from 1999. This special effects in this movie were huge. Everybody was talking about how fantastic the special effects were, but everybody was talking about just how great the movie was. It was so good. It inspired 2 other sequels. It inspired a spin-off franchise. It's inspired, like, I can't even begin to talk about
the modern reboot with our favorite Tom Cruise.
Yeah, that failed to capture the fun.
Yeah.
The influence of this movie on movie culture surrounding The Mummy. When people talk about The Mummy, like Hayden said, he didn't realize this was a remake, or maybe that was Bryce. People think of this movie. When you think of The Mummy, you think of this movie, not the classic Universal monster from 1932. It's in the back of your mind, but this movie is so strong that you don't really connect it to. And like I said, it kicked off The Rock. The Rock is who he is today because of the sequel to this movie. That was his first big break. He played the Scorpion King in The Mummy 2. So, and then he went on to do the spin-off series, The Scorpion King. This movie has had more significant impact culturally than I think any movie that we've covered in this podcast so far. And what I mean is not like tweets and posts about it or people talking about like, oh, Academy Awards, not that. This movie, this movie just inspired so much after it. It captivated for the early 2000s. It was mesmerizing what this movie did. The box office was 416 million, something like that, on what was a pretty slim budget, if I remember right. It was
80 million.
80 million. It blew up further than anyone thought. And I'll get into why when we do our final thoughts. But it's a 5 out of 5 on It Factor.
Yeah, you don't got to do much to convince me of that. I also gave it a big old 5. One of the comments you made was really differentiated itself from what people used to think of as a mummy from the Universal monsters. It set itself apart as the mummy. And it's so iconic. Again, Brendan Fraser, this was I shouldn't say my first. I'm pretty sure I watched George of the Jungle as well. But this was one of my first experiences with him, and I fell in love with him. And we talk about, this resurgence in support for him with other news that has come out, other projects he's worked on. Doom Patrol. I was interested in that movie. Mainly
Fantastic
with
performance.
Your influence on it, Tim.
Yeah.
But I wanted to watch it because Brendan Fraser was in it. And he's not really in it. It's his voice. But you don't get to see him.
He's still so good. He's still so good.
He acts the heck out of it. And he brings that same energy to everything he's in. And so does everyone else in the cast. I'm not as familiar with them and their acting, their catalogs, but it's amazing. And like you said, got 5 times the amount of its budget at the box office. We're still watching it today, still hearing about it. There's just, you can't, I don't think there could be any argument made against this movie getting a 5 that I would tolerate. That means, Bryce, you better not have anything less than 5. Or we're going to be fighting through the screen.
I also just wanted to point out, I don't think we have talked about a movie that has inspired video games, an animated series, and a roller coaster.
There's an animated video game on this?
There was a 2001 animated series. It was called Secrets of the Magi, but it wasn't super long running, but it was a kids WB network animated series in 2001.
Kids WB network. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So anyways, Bryce, your It Factor.
All right, Yana, if I may take the stand here. Thank you so much. Okay, I will admit I was probably a little harsh with the 3 here. It's definitely probably more of a 4, but definitely.
Oh my God! I feel like I'm being mummified alive.
Here we go. Hold on. Okay, boys, hold on here. Okay, I'm going to push back a little bit because while I definitely hear you guys and I understand that, listen. This movie is definitely fun. It's definitely awesome. And it's one of my favorite sit down, turn off my brain and have a great time movies. I love it. However, while it has inspired a lot of sequels and a lot of spinoffs, tell me, do you, outside of obviously The Mummy Returns is stupid fun, but it's not that great at the end of the day. How many of these movies do you actually go back and rewatch? How many of them are actually memorable? How many of them are actually good? The
It Factor is not based on the quality of what it inspired, but the fact that it inspired.
But I think it still plays into the fact that, listen, this movie is still great. However, I don't think it's had that much of an impact on moviegoers and other films that it's like, it's good, but I don't think it's that big. Like, it's definitely, I would say the biggest thing of this movie and why, it should probably be a 4 instead of a 3 is Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser alone probably puts that movie up there for me. While I do like I said, I do like the other actors in here, Brendan Fraser is the one who really brought this movie to the forefront of conversation and why it still gets talked about to this day. I think if you take Brendan Fraser out, it does not have that same effect. Not to say that's why I docked it a 4, but I'm just saying, I think that we give this movie just a little bit too much credit with a 5 by saying, it's still this fantastic movie, yada, yada. Like it stands the test of time. It's like, I can be honest. I don't really see or hear people talking about this movie unless the name Brendan Fraser is thrown around, or for some weird reason it just comes up in conversations like a 13 Nights of Halloween where we're talking about it. Now, again, I'm not knocking the movie. I do enjoy it a lot, and I do like sitting down and watching this movie. I could watch it at any time, but I do think that it doesn't quite have as much of that have as much of an effect as you are claiming it to have. I think that recently with Brendan Fraser having some standout roles in like The Whale, what was it? Titans, was it? I think, and Doom Patrol, that's what it was. I think with him kind of having his resurgence, the movie along with it, because it's it is probably his biggest movie, right? I don't know. I can't think of another movie outside of maybe The Whale, I guess. But
this one, George of the Jungle. Yeah.
Like, I think the only reason you're hearing more about it now is because he's had his resurgence. And I think that's why I land more with like a soft 4. It's definitely in the 4 category. I shouldn't have said 3. That's probably wrong, but definitely soft 4 more than a 5 there.
I think
you like to have hot takes.
It's not really that hot of a take.
Well, it is, because you're mentioning you think the only reason this movie is being talked about is Brendan Fraser's resurgence.
That's not the only reason.
I don't hear people talking about George of the Jungle because it doesn't hold up.
You're right.
As well,
and I would say the same thing about, in fact, George of the Jungle would definitely be a 3 in this category, because it is what it is. Brendan Fraser is probably the only reason you think about that movie. Same thing with this movie. I really don't think this movie would be where it's at if it wasn't for Brendan Fraser. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but again, if it is his top movie, and so you're obviously going to have this movie come up in conversation if he has a resurgence and people are talking about him because of The Whale or Doom Patrol, because he is a great actor, I think. I just don't think the movie, if you kind of take that into account, I just don't think the movie quite it wouldn't have the staying power that it does. And that's just my humble opinion. I don't think it's that hot of a take.
Oh, okay. Hayden, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that it really does speak to the it factor of this movie that, 24 years on, that people who are just now hearing about Brendan Fraser, who really has been out of the spotlight for quite a while up until he got back in with Doom Patrol, what was that, 5-6 years ago when started going. And the fact that people were able to go back to this movie and it still is such a success all those years on, I think that really there speaks to just how much of an it factor it is. And if Brendan Fraser is taken out of this property, does it do as well? Probably not. I mean, you could throw even a big action star like Brad Pitt into this role, and I don't think that he brings the same levels of charisma. But the best part about it is that Brendan Fraser did get this role, and so we got to experience it with him. And I think that his prowess, along with everyone else, really, really does just amp that it factor up. And, I'm sure that I could be talked into maybe coming down to a really low 5, like 5.001. I don't know if you get me to like 4, but I think that I get what you're saying for sure. But you're wrong and I'm right.
Yes.
And this movie's the best.
So what I'm hearing is you are not wrong when you're talking about the quality of this film. I get what you're saying. However, the it factor should not represent the quality. The it factor is about how the world receives it.
Right. But again, that's what I feel like you kind of made my point there is the if factor is a 5 because of Brendan Fraser, not because of the movie itself. And so because of that, I'm not saying that's what I said. Hayden made that point. It's like, because Brendan Fraser is in this movie and because people are going back to watch it because they heard of Brendan Fraser, that's a 5 out of 5 for Brendan Fraser. That's not a 5 out of 5 for the movie itself. Because if we are going to separate the two at that point, then, I feel like you have to not saying you have to, but that's why I do come down to that 4 out of 5, because we are talking about an actor who is causing people to kind of come back to this movie that he made a long time ago, that probably without him, it would not get the attention it gets now. And that's not a bad thing by any means. I'm glad other people get to have fun with this movie like we do, but that just kind of proves but it makes my case of that without Brendan Fraser, if we're talking about the it factor of this movie, then I think it comes down to that 4 out of 5 instead of 5. Again, not saying you guys are wrong. I totally get the 5 out of 5 and I respect it. But to say I'm wrong.
Well, no, now I'll finish the point I was trying to make. The 5 speaks to the movie itself, not to Brendan Fraser. This film inspired 2 sequels. It inspired spin-off series that did not have Brendan Fraser in them. It inspired a 2-season animated TV show called The Mummy. It inspired the reboot of the franchise. It inspired a action and adventure game for PlayStation. It inspired a Game Boy Color puzzle game. It inspired a 2001 animated series based on the Magi. It inspired a roller coaster. That speaks to the film, not to Brendan Fraser. And because of all of that, like, I don't know of another movie. Top Gun inspired the roller coaster at Kings Island and was a huge box office success. But this movie, that's what the it factor is talking about, is how this movie had ripple effects throughout not just the box office and not just the Academy Awards, but the lasting effect of this movie, whether it is still talked about 20 years from now, but the fact that when it hit, it had huge ramifications, even without Brendan Fraser. I also think to only talk about Brendan Fraser in this movie, while he is captivating and, yes, one of the main reasons to watch this movie, we already talked about that nearly everybody in this movie delivers a fantastic performance. The Mummy himself is great. And Rachel Weisz's character is honestly fantastic. And if you put her, like Hayden mentioned, Brad Pitt, I'd still watch that movie. And it would probably have still had that same kind of ramifications. Because like we've mentioned many times, this is a world that feels lived in. And all of those sequels, all of those games, all of that other stuff is about the world of this film. And so that's what, like, when I'm talking about it factor, we can, you know what, I'll lead this right into how entertained I was. That's what I'm thinking of when I think of it factor. It's not just like Twilight, terrible film, but it had huge impact on society and still is having sequels and weird spin-offs made. But that's the it factor to me. It doesn't speak to the quality of the film. But then I think it goes back to my entertainment value. So for me, entertainment value is a 10 out of 10. I had a great time watching this movie. I was watching this movie going, man, this is flying by. I'm already halfway through. And I was kind of surprised by that because it moves at a breakneck pace, but it also stops and gives us some time to breathe with our characters between major conflict scenes. And I'm sitting here going, they don't make movies like this anymore, where I feel like it was fun to make. They had a fun time making this because they wanted you to have a fun time at the theater. And that's what I had. I had a blast watching this, and I've seen it before. And I'm watching it going, man, why don't I watch this movie more? Because it's a great time. So it was a 10 out of 10 on the entertainment.
Yeah, it may be somewhat surprising to hear that I did not give it a 10 out of 10. I gave it a 9 out of 10. For myself, I think that one of the biggest factors there was that I split this movie. I watched half one night, half the next night. And we're dealing with one of our kids was getting sick when I was trying to watch the second half and everything. So I wasn't able to sit down and binge the movie from start to end all in one go. Got a full night's sleep, a whole day at work in between. So it kind of pulls you out of it a little bit. But I do think that this is one that, although I have not watched it in a while, I said it earlier, I'm excited to watch The Mummy Returns this weekend because I remember just how much I loved the Mummy and The Mummy Returns. I can't say I ever watched the Dragon Emperor, the third movie. But there was just so much fun in this that I'm ready to continue into it. And then I was just looking up, it made me remember another animated series that was slightly before this movie came out, but Mummies Alive. Now I'm like, man, I want to go back and watch that show again, because I remember getting that on VHS from the library and blah, blah, but it's got me going down this like rabbit hole of Egyptology for some reason, I guess. And just very, very, very fun to be experiencing this again. And it feels like I've been away from the movie long enough that this is rediscovering it and reliving all the fun that I got to have with it the first time around, and finding that passion for it again, that love for it. So 9 out of 10, probably 10 out of 10 if I could sit down and watch it start to finish, no problems, children gone, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I still had a great time coming back and seeing this for the 50th, 60th, however many times I've seen this movie at this point. For the most part, it still holds up pretty well. It's still just a fun time. I agree with you guys. I wish that we got more movies like this where we can just go to a movie and just be entertained. This is a great example of one of those movies. Like I said, outside of a couple like really nitpicky stuff towards the beginning of the movie with some pacing and even like shortening up the movie just a hair, I'm entertained throughout most of this movie. I'm not really on my phone much. I'm not thinking about other stuff. I'm pretty invested in the characters and their story, with a fun villain who just commands the screen and he means business. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it than that. So, solid 7 out of 10.
All right. So that takes us to, I'm not going to spend too long talking about final thoughts, because I think if you're listening, you get the point. My final score was a 40, which puts this movie at the top side of great. So just under amazing. It's great. And I think that's perfect representation. Like we talked about, I'm kind of jaded right now of all these movies that have to have interconnected universes and all this stuff. Some of them work great, but it often gets to a point where it robs a movie of its enjoyability to just watch the film. And this was made, almost what? It was 20 plus years ago now. But it's just an enjoyable film. You can watch it. You don't have to watch the sequels. You can put this one on. It's a great time. The entire cast, crew, everybody feels like they had a great time making this movie. And I miss the fun of the box office, if I'm going to be serious. Like, I can't think of the last time we had just a fun summer action adventure movie like this one. The closest, I'm trying to think of the last time I was just purely entertained at the box office, and the latest Mission Impossible was just entertaining. It was purely entertaining. I had a good time, but I didn't walk away like feeling as good as I felt walking away from this movie. This movie's pure escapism. And I think we've often drifted so far from that in movies, with everybody trying to make the next big, we're going for the next Oppenheimer, or we're going for the next shared universe, or we're going for the next, I don't know, but we miss the mark of just that movies are supposed to entertain. That's why they exist. And if you're not entertaining, you're failing at the one thing you're supposed to do. And this movie entertains, and I friggin' love this movie. Like I said, I don't know why I don't watch it more. I just think I was young when it came out, so it's not always at the front of my mind. But even some of the action sequences in this, I'm like, man, this is just still great to watch. And now, much like Hayden said, I want to watch the second one again, because I remember that one better than I remember this one, because I was older when it came out, and I went back and bought them a couple of years ago, and I love these movies. I have no complaints.
Yeah, overall, I gave this a 43. So pretty high compared to you guys.
That puts it in the amazing category.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think there's a better word truly for me to use to describe this movie. I know that we've all got our own opinions on it and whatnot. I mentioned earlier the one scene with the warden where he gets the scarab under his skin and he starts running around being super iconic. There are other scenes like when Rick throws the chair at Benji to stop him from escaping. That to me, like, I knew that happened in the movie. Hilarious. Like, again, such an iconic moment for me that just made this so much fun to watch. There's a scene at the end where all the mummies are attacking Rick and they're trying to protect Imhotep so he can finish the ritual. And Rick kicks a mummy right in the groin as if that's going to do anything. But it was just a small, silly little thing like that I'm sure Brendan Fraser probably just decided, I'm just going to do this screwing around in a take. And the director goes, no, that's awesome. That's right up your character's alley, and just kept it in there. Little things like that they all add up to make this movie amazing, and really, really, just really enjoyed it. I meant to comment on this when we were back at, maybe it was character or script, or acting or script. And I really liked how the movie would tie back in with itself. And one of them was the fact that when the Magi first show up, Rick's idea of getting them to like end everything is he lights that stick of dynamite and he pulls the fuse off of it. So
clever.
Throws it off to the side and he sticks the dynamite in his pocket. And I made the note in my phone, I hope the dynamite gets used later. And it does. In the very final fight, when they're getting down there, they're trying to retrieve the gold book. He picks up the fuse off the ground because they're in that same situation again, picks it up, sticks it right back in the thing, lights it, throws it. And I was like, oh, such a small detail. He could have grabbed another stick of dynamite, could have grabbed a hand grenade, could have just started shooting at it as if it were a cloud of sand. Nope. They wanted to come back to that because they knew it would pay off. And
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I noticed it too. It was good. Yep.
Oh, just such good stuff in there. And yeah, really excited, like I said, to sit down and watch the second one. I know I don't get to watch stuff like this as often. My fiance doesn't really love scary stuff. And this one, not super scary, but like the faces and everything really throw her. And our kids obviously just aren't maybe old enough for some of the stuff. But yeah, this is definitely like dad's night, like alone down in the basement or something with the projector set up. I'm definitely putting on The Mummy Returns this weekend and I'm going to enjoy myself.
Yeah, my final score rounds up to a 34 out of 50. If you want to throw in those few points for where you could sway me to a 4 from a 3, you probably got me at like 37, maybe 38 on a good day. Yeah, this movie was a blast to come back and rewatch. Like I said, I've seen this movie so many times I can't even count. I used to grab this movie off of the shelf at the library when it was on VHS and bring it home and watch it a ton. So I have very fond memories of this movie, and it's like coming back to an old friend and just reminiscing of the good old times. It's a great time. Don't overthink the movie going into it. I think almost everyone who watches this movie is going to enjoy it. There's not really a bad time to be had here. I think it's great just to sit down, watch by yourself, great in social settings. And like you were saying, I bet if a theater threw this on, they could easily sell out just because it's that entertaining and it's that much fun. Yeah, I have very little complaints. I probably couldn't watch this every single day, like a couple movies that I could do that with, but this is always a fun movie to come back and just sit down and have a good time with. So yeah.
All right. If we are just adding in a couple points for swaying Bryce, it puts us at a 39 out of 50, which overall puts it at a great movie for social settings. And I don't think anybody's arguing that point here.
No,
it is
not at all.
Truly a great movie for social settings. Now, the ultimate question: what about Halloween social settings?
Oh, totally.
I think
Why not?
It's not really a Halloween vibe of a movie, but it does have some spooky stuff in it. Like Hayden said, some of the face stuff gets a little creepy. Some of the mummy stuff can be a little bit, if you are with people who don't like scary movies, this might be the perfect Halloween movie because it's got a little bit of scares, but not enough to disturb your sleep.
And there's some good kills in this too.
There are some good kills. The scene.
Also the scarabs specifically.
Those I hate bugs to
those
begin with.
terrified me growing up. Oh my! They still make me kind of eek when I watch it, even now.
Oh, yes. I was Googling, do scarabs move that fast while watching the movie? Because I will probably never go to Egypt, but those alone from this movie I will steer clear of it completely.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So did you find out, do they move that fast?
I'll be honest, I fell asleep before I read any of the answers. I'm going to find out right now, though.
And you were talking about some kills. There was that one scene, just totally thought about it, when the mummy he's sand and he lifts the other adventurer up and it
dehydrates him basically.
Yes, and you see his body shrivel through a shadow.
That was unsettling.
Yes, there's some good scares in this film. If you're listening, this is probably one of the most accessible films that we have on the 13 Nights of Halloween list.
It's better than over half of these movies.
Oh, easily. It's probably it's up there as our top 1, top 2.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we know you've seen the list. You know what's coming up. I'll be honest. It's in contention for Halloween H2O, but we'll see when we get there what we thought of that one.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic film, guys. Just
check it out. It'll be fun.
Thanks for showing up, Hayden. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, of course. Thank you guys for having me. One little fun fact of trivia that I did find. First off, I can't find anything on how fast scarabs move, but I did find a few things that say that even a single scarab's deadly. They'll be perfectly happy digging through your skin and burrowing into your flesh until it finds your brain. So if that doesn't scare you and get you in the Halloween spirit, I don't know what's gonna, man. The other fun piece of trivia, you guys commented at the very beginning of our recording here today about how Imhotep speaks only in ancient Egyptian, but is so captivating. Originally, the director was going to have Arnold do the narration for the opening of the movie, but then it was brought to his attention by Arnold that his character doesn't speak English. So why would he narrate the opening of the movie in English? So they ended up switching it over and had the leader of the Magi narrate it instead. So I thought that was a really small touch that just shows a lot of care in the movie and overall what you're doing with it. And just made me fall in love with this movie even more. So had to get that nerdy little fun fact out there for everybody.
Yeah,
that is awesome. All right. Well, we hope you have had a good time tonight on 13 Nights of Halloween. This is night 5, I believe. I'm losing track as we get deeper and deeper into this. We have more coming your way. We still have a bunch more days till Halloween. We hope you're having fun, even though right now we're on like a good movie, bad movie cycle, at least in our opinion. Let us know what you're thinking. Hit the link, either if you're on Facebook, hit the link in the post. If you're on Instagram, hit the link tree in our bio. Let us know what you think of the movie. Fill out your reviews, give us your comments, and make sure to like, follow, and subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final words, gentlemen, or shall we call this a night?
I think it's a
night. Bryce is wrong and I'm right. This movie's the best ever. I got nothing, man.
Hey, no fighting. No. We respect different opinions.
Listen, we'll watch the 2017 Mummy movie and get on again, and we will agree across the board on everything. I bet.
Yes, it's not a bad idea.
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Yep. See you later.
See ya.